What if the feeling that everything is under control financially is the exact thing destroying your future? Not chaos, not crisis, not debt spiraling out of control. The thing that keeps most people financially trapped is far more subtle and far more dangerous than any of those. It's the quiet comfort of balance, the illusion that because nothing is falling apart, everything must be fine. You pay your bills, you cover your rent, you even manage to eat out once or twice a week. At the end of the month, your account reads somewhere between $0 and a few $100s, and you tell yourself, I'm doing okay. That feeling, that specific, warm, deceiving feeling, is what I call the fragile balance. And it is costing you everything. Let me tell you about someone. His name doesn't matter. He's 34 years old, lives in a mid-sized city, earns a decent salary by most people's standards. Not rich, not poor. He has a car payment, a lease on a one-bedroom apartment, a streaming subscription he forgets to cancel, and a credit card he pays the minimum on every month. On paper, he's surviving. In his head, he's managing. But here's the truth. No one around him is saying out loud, he is one emergency away from complete financial collapse. A car breakdown, a medical bill, a layoff. Any single unexpected event would push him past the edge. And yet, every single morning, he wakes up feeling like he has it together. That's the trap. That's the fragile balance. The fragile balance is not a state of financial health. It is the illusion of financial health. It is the psychological experience of stability built on a foundation so thin that it cannot survive any real pressure. And the cruelest part, it feels exactly like safety. Charlie Munger, one of the greatest financial minds of the last century, said something that most people hear but never truly absorb. The first rule of compounding is to never interrupt it unnecessarily. But how can you compound anything when every month ends at zero? How can you build anything when the structure you're living in consumes every resource the moment it arrives? Munger wasn't just talking about investment mechanics, he was talking about a way of being in relationship with money. A relationship that most people never develop because they're too busy maintaining the illusion of balance to ever build something real. Here's what the fragile balance looks like in behavior. You get a raise, and within 3 months, your expenses quietly expand to absorb it. You pay off one credit card, and within 6 months, another one fills up. You save a small amount, and the moment something breaks, the phone, the appliance, the tire, that savings disappears entirely, and you're back to zero. Economists have a name for the first pattern: lifestyle inflation. But there's something deeper going on underneath all of these behaviors, something that lifestyle inflation doesn't fully explain. There is a psychological mechanism at work that actively resists accumulation, and until you understand it, you cannot escape it. Ray Dalio built one of the most successful hedge funds in human history. His framework for understanding systems, financial, political, personal, rests on one core principle. Most crises don't come from sudden shocks. They come from slow, invisible accumulations of fragility. The system looks stable right up until the moment it isn't. The fragile balance operates exactly this way inside your personal finances. Month after month, the numbers look manageable, and then one day they don't, and the collapse feels sudden, but it wasn't. It was inevitable from the first month you confused zero with safe. So why does this happen? Why do intelligent, hard-working people end up caught in this loop for years, sometimes decades? The answer lives in psychology, not spreadsheets. Human beings are wired to respond to immediate pain and immediate pleasure. We are not wired, not naturally, not without deliberate training, to respond to invisible future risk. When your bank account reads zero at the end of the month, but all the bills are paid, your brain registers this as success. The threat is not visible. There is no alarm going off. There is no fire to put out. And so the reward system in your brain says you did it. You survived another month. Well done. This is the neurological trap at the heart of the fragile balance. Your brain is literally rewarding you for a state of existence that is quietly preparing your financial ruin. Naval Ravikant, the philosopher-investor who has thought more carefully about wealth creation than almost anyone alive, makes a distinction that cuts right through this. There is a difference between getting rich and staying broke at a higher income level. Most people who feel like they're doing better financially are simply experiencing the second thing. They earn more, they spend more. The gap between what comes in and what goes out never changes. The balance stays fragile, the foundation stays thin, and the feeling of progress is entirely manufactured. Now here is the concept I want you to sit with. The fragile balance is not an accident. It is not bad luck. It is not even primarily a math problem. It is a design problem. Your financial life has been designed by your habits, your environment, your identity, and your unconscious relationship with money to maintain this specific state, not to grow, not to collapse, to hover, and the system is remarkably good at what it does. Every time you get close to building something real, something in the design pulls you back. A new desire, an unexpected expense, a social obligation, a story you tell yourself about why now isn't the right time to start investing, to cut back, to change. The fragile balance is self-correcting. It defends itself. Think of it like a financial ecosystem that has evolved to sustain itself at the survival level. In nature, an ecosystem will consume exactly the resources available to it. It doesn't accumulate. It doesn't build reserves beyond what the immediate environment demands. It survives. And survival, in biological terms, is enough. But you are not a forest. You are a human being with the capacity to design systems that transcend survival. You have the ability to build wealth that outlasts your working years, that creates options, that transforms the trajectory of your family for generations. But only if you break the ecosystem. Only if you disrupt the fragile balance on purpose. Let me give you the first layer of what disruption actually looks like. It begins with a reframe so simple it sounds almost dismissive, but its implications are profound. Zero is not neutral. Zero is negative. When your month ends at zero, you have not succeeded. You have consumed everything that arrived. You have left nothing to compound. You have paid everyone, your landlord, your utility company, your bank, your phone provider, your streaming services, before you paid yourself. And in doing so, you have reinforced the exact design that keeps the balance fragile. The moment you understand that zero is a failure condition disguised as a neutral one, your relationship with money begins to shift. The second layer is understanding the difference between reactive finance and intentional finance. Reactive finance is what most people practice. Money comes in, demands arise, money goes out. The decisions are made in response to circumstances. Intentional finance is something else entirely. It is the practice of deciding before the money arrives where it will go and what it will build. Warren Buffett did not become the greatest investor in history by reacting to opportunities. He built a system, a philosophy, a set of principles, a disciplined process that operated independently of emotion, impulse, and circumstance. You do not need Buffett's capital to adopt Buffett's discipline, but you do need to stop waiting for circumstances to change before you start designing your financial life with intention. The third layer is the identity question, and this one is the hardest. Most people do not think of themselves as wealthy. They think of wealth as something that happens to other people. People who were lucky, people who were born into it, people who caught some specific break that never came for them. And because they do not think of themselves as wealthy, they do not behave like wealthy people. They behave like people who are managing, people who are getting by, People for whom a little extra at the end of the month is something to celebrate rather than something to deploy. The fragile balance is, at its deepest level, an identity, and you will not break it with a budget spreadsheet. You will only break it when you begin to see yourself differently, when the person managing the money and the person building wealth become the same person. The fourth layer is what I call the threshold shift. There is a number in your financial life that represents the difference between fragility and resilience. It is not a large number. For most people, it is somewhere between 1 and 3 months of expenses sitting in a completely liquid, completely untouched account that exists for no other purpose than to absorb the shocks that life inevitably delivers. Below that threshold, you are fragile. Every unexpected expense is a crisis. Every crisis reinforces the belief that financial progress is impossible for you. Above that threshold, something psychologically transformative happens. You begin to make decisions from a place of stability rather than fear. You stop saying yes to financial compromises because you feel you have no choice. You gain, for the first time, genuine optionality. The threshold shift is not the end of the journey. It is the first step out of the fragile balance. The fifth layer is what separates people who read about wealth from people who build it. Consistency of small, unsexy actions over an absurdly long period of time. Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing and the man who taught Warren Buffett everything he knew about the market, understood something that most retail investors still refuse to accept. The market does not reward excitement. It rewards patience. It rewards discipline. It rewards the accumulation of small, correct decisions compounded over time. The same principle applies to personal finance. The dramatic move, the side hustle that will change everything, the investment that will 10x your money, the business idea that will finally set you free. These narratives are seductive because they promise to dissolve the fragile balance all at once, but they almost never do. What dissolves the fragile balance is the unsexy, relentless practice of spending less than you earn, saving the difference and letting time do the compounding that you cannot do with willpower alone. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I know all of this. I've heard this before. I want to change, but the numbers just don't work. I don't earn enough. My expenses are too high. My city is too expensive. My situation is different. And here is where I need to be brutally honest with you. Not to make you feel bad, but because no one around you is willing to say what actually needs to be said. The story that your numbers don't allow for change is, for the vast majority of people reading this, not a financial truth. It is a psychological defense mechanism. It is the way the fragile balance protects itself, because if the problem is the numbers, then the solution requires the numbers to change, and that feels outside your control. But if the problem is the design, then the solution requires you to change. And that feels too hard, too slow, too uncertain. And so the balance holds. And another month passes, and another year. And one day you are older, and the gap between where you are and where you could have been is so large that the math of compounding, which could have worked powerfully in your favor, now works against you. The cost of not changing is not abstract. It is not a philosophical concern. It is the specific texture of a life lived without options. It is the feeling of being unable to leave a job that is destroying you because you cannot afford 3 months without income. It is the experience of watching your children inherit not wealth, but the same fragile patterns you never broke. It is the slow erosion of confidence that comes from knowing, somewhere below the level of conscious thought, that you are not building anything, that the balance you feel is borrowed, that underneath the surface of your okay life, the foundation is thin. This is the moment. Not next year, Not when you earn more, not when the circumstances are better. This moment right now is the one where you decide whether the fragile balance continues to define your financial life, or whether you begin slowly and with full awareness of how slow it will feel to build something that can actually hold weight. The transformation I am describing is not from poor to rich. It is not from struggling to comfortable. It is from someone controlled by the architecture of financial survival to someone who designed consciously and deliberately a financial life with genuine structural integrity. That shift begins in the mind before it ever appears in the bank account. It begins with the recognition that the balance you have been defending is not something worth protecting, that the feeling of okay is not the same as the reality of okay, that stability built on nothing is not stability at all. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it immediately. What would change in your life and in your decisions, your behaviors, your daily relationship with money, if you stopped measuring financial success by whether the bills are paid, and started measuring it by whether you are building something that did not exist before? What would you do differently tomorrow morning if zero was no longer acceptable as an outcome? Who would you become if you stopped being someone who manages and started being someone who builds? Those questions are not rhetorical. They are the beginning of the work, and the work, if you do it, will be the most important financial decision you ever make. Not the investment, not the income stream, not the strategy, the decision to stop living inside the fragile balance. If this conversation has shifted something in you, even slightly, even uncomfortably, drop the word builder in the comments. Not for the algorithm. Because I want to know who here is done with fragile, done with okay, done with the balance that costs everything. And if you want to keep building the architecture of a different financial life, week after week, concept by concept, subscribe to this channel. This is not a place for tips and tricks. This is a place for the kind of thinking that actually changes how you see money, wealth, and what you are capable of building with the one financial life you have. The balance was never the goal. The foundation is.